Hi, I'm Dash Glitch. I'm a music and sound creator and general noise maker. I live in Cape Town, South Africa, and yeah, this is my story.
Can you tell me the moment when you decided you wanted to make Psytrance?
Oh, it was a difficult one. I've always kind of been a little bit, when I was always been into music. It's very much into hip hop and punk, ska, and that kind of stuff. I was in a couple of bands, and I was never really interested in electronic music until I heard Spangle, who was obviously a live band who incorporated a lot of very psychedelic elements, stuff like synthesizers and stuff like that. And in my youth, I'd been kind of exposed to synthesizers and stuff because my dad was a musician. He was very much into synthesizers. But at the time, in my kind of like limited knowledge, I kind of just heard sirens, very unusable musical stuff to my ear. But then when I heard some like bands like Spangle, they kind of like completely blew open my kind of frame of reference for what good music could be. And shortly after that, my friends basically forced me to go to a trance party and listen to the music in the proper environment, in the proper mind state. And since then I was hooked. I literally got home, installed Fruity Loops, and almost never thought about traditional music or creating traditional music again. It was just synthesizers and experimental stuff. And it kind of took me a little while to kind of find my way in Psytrance. Limited in my knowledge, and my ears were pretty underdeveloped, so it took me a while to kind of like develop the ability to hear what was going on and like kind of try to recreate that in the music. Actually quite several years. But I think having the background in music definitely helped with that.
What kind of background in music do you have?
So I played drums in a couple of bands. When I was very much younger, my parents talked me into piano lessons. I was never really that keen on them. I did them, but to me, playing traditional classical music over and over again wasn't that exciting. But I kind of didn't see the bigger picture, the fact that knowing music theory could indefinitely, pave the way for being able to open something like Fruity Loops and know what was happening in a piano roll, for example. I think a lot of guys, they'll, not know what C is and not know what certain things are. And I think that's already a big learning curve. So I think understanding like the fundamentals was definitely a big help for me,
Dance music is quite an interesting thing, be it dubstep or house music or trance. What do you think is really going on when people are interacting with this kind of music?
I think it's something that's kind of beyond what words can describe. A lot of people say music is like a language because it's something that is created in the mind and sort of pervade to the listener, and the listener can interpret it in several different ways. But I think the way it's different to traditional language is there aren't these kind of set words and ways that people react to certain things. And I think, at least to me, one of the most fascinating things performing music is seeing how so many different people react to different things in the music differently, and how people would react the same to certain things, and thinking about why that is, why there's certain messages in music that make people react certain ways, and why it is that so many people like kind of interpret things in so many different ways. And I think that's also sort of the beauty behind, any sort of art, in that you can sort of interpret it or view like a painting or something, and it might not mean anything to you at a specific time, but in a different moment, maybe you're thinking about something else and you can see something else in a painting, or you can hear something else in music that you didn't hear before. And I think that's quite, that's almost testament to how I was kind of exposed to Psytrance music, in that I wasn't aware of those extra layers that certain creators were putting into the music and that kind of thing. For me, it was a traditional drums go there, guitar goes there, So I think it took a little while to kind of break out of that. And I think the fascinating thing about dance music as an entirety, whether it's drum and bass or whatever different genres, is there these kind of elements of traditional music, but they're often used in ways which traditional musicians would frown upon, like sampling and that kind of thing. But if you catch that traditional musician in a club on the dance floor, they'll be going wild because that piece of music speaks to them in a particular way, and they just happen to be in a very positive kind of mindset, to interpret the art. And I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that. And I think in music, unlike a lot of the other art forms, there's a lot of negativity when people are trying to interpret art. When people listen to stuff, they immediately think, what would my friends think of this music, or that kind of thing. And that's kind of the judgment that they make, as opposed to just interpreting it for what it is. It's just a creative thing. And they should either enjoy it or put something else on. People come to the listening experience already with a negative perspective based on maybe the artist's previous works, or maybe their feelings about where they are in their musical career. And I think, again, it stems from people maybe chasing the wrong side of, the music industry we were discussing earlier, where I think a lot of people get caught up in the business side of things. They see these massive artists on the Beatport charts and they're never able to achieve these, and they kind of get disheartened, and it kind of makes them feel negative just about music in general. And a lot of the time, I very rarely see people promote music and say, this is a cool song that I heard, or that kind of thing. It's always memes ripping off an artist, or people sharing something and saying, what has this guy done? He's destroyed his music, it's now commercial, he's destroying the Psytrance culture and that kind of stuff. And I think if people just concentrated more on just creating music and creating their own creative endeavors, then they would feel a lot more positive just about the world in general.
The journey is a long journey to become someone who is confident in the work that they do. Because when you start making music, normally you have a taste of what you hear in your head and what you want to make, but you can't make those sounds and you don't know how to make those sounds. And it's a very long, frustrating journey to get to that point. What was it like for you?
Self-doubt is the most destructive element in art. And I think it's something that plagues every artist. It's something that's very difficult to overcome, especially considering the harsh realities of the music industry, and the harsh realities of social media and how these systems are set up so that you have to pay to promote yourself, and it's almost like the entire structure of business around music has taken the creativity out of it, and they've kind of forced musicians to become businessmen. And on one hand, it can be a good thing because it kind of separates the ones who are really putting in the effort and the ones who are not. But on the other hand, it can become incredibly disheartening for newer artists out there, because there's so many guys out there making music now that you really have to put in 150% effort 24 hours a day to break through as a business product, as a business, in the business side of things. If you look at like Beatport and how many tracks are getting submitted probably on a daily basis, then having to compete where, from a record label's point of view, they're seeing an artist who's like already established, who's already has X amount of sales. To compete with that is almost impossible. So I think, the key for me to overcome that kind of like self-doubt was to just completely ignore the business side of things in terms of the music, and concentrate on just, being happy in the moments of when I'm creating music, finding when you first started creating music, each sound you made was like a whole new journey. It was like, I'm sure it is with everyone, when you discover like, oh my gosh, you can make a kick drum from a sine wave. It's like, what else can you do with a sine wave? Oh my gosh, everything is based on sine waves, and it's this kind of like avalanching experience. And I think a lot of guys who focus on the business side of things, they're trying too hard to apply knowledge that they've already garnered into a kind of sellable product, and they're not focusing enough on those light bulb moments and just enjoying those. And that in itself can create a whole avalanche effect of self-doubt, I think.
Cape Town, it's a beautiful city and it's your home. You grew up here, and what was it like growing up in Cape Town and enjoying the Psytrance scene here?
Well, I think growing up in Cape Town was amazing because, if you look everywhere in the world, there's so few places that cherish the arts and culture scene as much as they do in Cape Town. And I think I probably wouldn't have been able to pursue my career and what I do if I weren't living in the place that I do, because there's just so much inspiration here. The teachers in the art classes and stuff were incredible. They were all inspirational, and there's so many good musicians and so many good artists that come from this place. But again, it's difficult because, when you look at it in the international business side of things, so few of those artists actually break through because, again, it's just, it's so competitive. But, having the internet, and as, technology advances, I think a lot of Cape Townians and South Africans are getting recognized internationally, and I think it's beautiful. So, yeah, represent.
When you were younger in the scene, did you have any role models or people that you looked up to, and who were these people?
I think it's a difficult one because, creating music, it's a kind of never-ending journey, and you always have, as an artist, your sound will develop through different styles. And, I was very much into the more darker stuff, and only recently started making kind of the more melodic stuff, even though I always enjoyed listening to it. I guess, having inspiration and listening to different artists and creating a sound is kind of two different things. And I think a lot of guys focus on these role models, and they end up sounding very much like them. And I think for me, I tried not to focus on one particular role model. And because, in the early days, I could see how it would shape my sound. And I guess it's because maybe I was lucky in that I had a bit of musical training and it maybe developed my ear a little bit quicker when I did finally get into production and that kind of thing. So I kind of tried to get inspiration from everyone in the scene and try to meld my kind of own sound around that, I guess. So it's hard to say. But I guess if there was one, like local artists, if there was one that I had to say truly, truly inspired me the most, it would be Hydroglyph. They're not around anymore, unfortunately, but they were probably the one that like inspired me the most, I would say.
Psychedelic music and psychedelic culture is an interesting thing, and it's different things to different people. What is it to you?
Ooh, it's a difficult one. I think to me it's, an introspective thing. A lot of music kind of is, specifically dance music, it's kind of meant to be enjoyed as a group kind of endeavor, in a club and that kind of stuff. And obviously, trance festivals, you enjoy it in a group, but really engaging with the music is a very introspective thing, and really engaging with, psychedelic art and stuff like that it's generally a very introspective thing because you're seeing things in there that might not have been put in there, and it's your mind kind of showing you things subconsciously that might not be there. And I think it's due to the amount of maybe like layers in the sound or, the different kind of the unexpectancies, if that's a word, the unexpectancies of sounds and that kind of thing. When you look at psychedelic art, it's always very complex and geometric, and there's not often a traditional composition, if that makes sense. And that leads the mind to fill in the gaps. And I think that's something that's truly special about, the psychedelic experience is you have to be open to it to let your mind fill in those gaps and stuff. And, I saw that in the beginning, no, electronic music is rubbish. It's just doof doof. And then, I was kind of, the doors of perception were opened. Yeah.
Some of the insights you've gained from having these kinds of experiences?
I guess maybe it's learning to trust your judgment, specifically as an artist, going back to the self-doubt thing. Because it's kind of such a introspective experience, you really learn like the shortfalls and stuff in your own psyche. And I guess that's going to make you a better artist if you open your mind to it, being able to trust your judgment a little bit better, overcome self-doubt and that kind of stuff. But I mean, even like I said, it was, only up until recently that I really feel like I could create in a space where even I wasn't judging the creativity of the music per se. I mean, obviously I was analyzing it in terms of the mixing and the production, but I think a lot of guys are very hard on themselves in the wrong aspects. I think a lot of what I see is producers kind of comparing themselves to these big artists, and rather than kind of just judging the kind of level of depth in the experience of making the music. So I'll hear example of a track that maybe has all the elements that a professional track has, and it sounds good. You know, it's full, it's well mixed, but it just doesn't have something fresh and something deep and something introspective to that artist. You know, they didn't open their mind up when creating it. And often you can hear that in the music. And maybe it's just a placebo effect or something, but...
So the music is almost flat, or it doesn't really stimulate the mind, or...
Yeah, I guess, you know, maybe it's kind of reading too deep into it, you know, maybe but I mean, I guess with all, you know, if something's not well produced, then maybe it will sound a bit flat, you know. But I think it's deeper than that, you know. You can kind of see the intensity that somebody's kind of put in, I guess. And it's not always in the kind of like overproduction of something, but often you can hear, you know, like an example is a friend sent me a track that they're working on, and there was a segment in there with this rhythm that was completely off the 4/4, like completely. But it just sounded so syncopated, and it just sounded so awesome that, you know, I think it totally fits in that example. And I think it's truly inspiring to see artists try to break out of that kind of structure of 4/4, 16th notes. You know, it's that kind of thing, you know, where they think before acting. It's like, what are my intentions with this piece of music? You know, is it just to create another piece of music like this big artist, or is it to enjoy the creation process and maybe learn something new about music or about my capabilities, and, you know, that kind of thing. And I think that kind of thing can truly shine, like can show through in any sort of creative product, I guess.
The Cape Town scene has grown a lot over the last few years. How healthy do you think it is?
Well, I think, you know, despite what you might read on Facebook and despite what people are posting about, you know, certain promoters and stuff, I think Cape Town Psytrance scene or electronic music scene in general has always really been at quite a healthy state. I mean, if you look at the fact that most of the party promoters respect other promoters' dates, you don't see a lot of international artists coming down and being headhunted by smaller promoters to play. I think there's a lot of respect between promoters. And I think that's one thing that is really special about the Cape Town scene. Whereas if you look at, you know, obviously I don't know, but, you know, you hear stories overseas about drama and, you know, that kind of thing, and people trying to shut down other people's parties and that kind of thing. I mean, obviously I've heard about it here locally, but those kinds of negative forces often get weeded out very quickly. And I think it's due to the fact that there's a lot of respect between promoters and artists in the scene here. We support each other quite a lot, and we watch out for these people because it could potentially be damaging to our livelihood or that kind of thing.
So what's your message to up-and-coming producers?
Just try to put in a little bit every day, you know, even if it's in an iPad app at work or a cell phone app, just making some sounds, or on a laptop if you don't have time. Just try to put in at least 30 minutes or an hour every day, whether it's trying to finish a produced track or just opening up a VST plugin and just making sounds. I think for me, the most light bulb moments were those moments where there was no project or anything. It was just a blank project. Open up a plugin, start making a sound from in it, and suddenly I've got 10 sounds, and those 10 sounds can now be the basis for a brand new track. And I think a lot of artists forget to just session those creative sessions, you know, just make stuff. There's no end goal here, you know, just make sounds, save them. And being able to build up my own kind of database of thousands of sounds that I've created, I could easily just, open Cubase, boom, boom, boom. Within a few minutes, I had something going. And I think that's very important. And I think a lot of artists should focus more on that. Just creating their own sounds, learning the basics of how the synth that they want to use works, the routing, how the filters work and that kind of stuff. So just spend more time learning and creating and less time pushing yourself to finish. And once you've kind of created this, arsenal of sounds that you're comfortable with, then buckle down, create a project template, and just, from that point, then work it out and get the mix done, and then put in the effort.
What was the lowest point for you in your career?
I think it was the realization that I wasn't going to be the kind of top beatport seller, and that I kind of had to find other means, It was a harsh reality to come to terms with, As a musician, we all kind of want that big fame, or maybe not all of us, But that realization was, my lowest point, but thereafter was like the key to, becoming confident in my own creation and, overcoming the self-doubt. It was kind of like a give and take situation.
What has been the high points of your career?
Oh, it's difficult. I think there's so many that I can consider to be high points, When I reached 5,000 subscribers, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my high point, And then I reached 10,000 and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my high point, And now I recently reached 20,000 and I'm like, So it's difficult to say. Also playing at some of the festivals that I've, always dreamed of. Those are, of course, high points. But it's hard to kind of pin down one, I guess. I'm kind of quite appreciative of what I've kind of been given in this life, I guess.
What has been your favorite set?
I really enjoyed Origin this last Origin I've played at. I've played at Origin before, but I always feel like playing in the daytime, it's easier to kind of, I touched on earlier about being able to interpret these kind of messages that you're sending to the audience and kind of seeing the movements that they do with certain sounds. And as much as I obviously enjoy playing at nighttime, you don't get to kind of connect and, see the results of these kind of like biometric tests, I guess. So I always enjoy playing in the daytime. Also, the lineup was like some of my favorite artists, Tristan and Kilowatts, and so yeah, it was super inspiring. A good start to 2020.
And what are you currently listening to?
Lots of stuff. I spend a lot of time. I've got like a Patreon system that I kind of run, and for like my high tier supporters, I've got like a private group that we kind of run. It's like, I wouldn't call it a support group as such, but we use it to kind of like give each other feedback on the mix and stuff on certain tracks and stuff. And so I spend a lot of my days listening to the music that they create. And obviously, like when I'm working, I'll put on like a Asterix live at whichever and listen to his set, because I enjoy listening to a full set like while I'm typing something. But most of the time when I'm just like choosing to listen to music, it'll be, from my supporters, listening to what they're doing, and it's actually quite amazing to see, maybe I'll hear a sound that is in one of my sound banks that they've like put into the track and they've changed it, and used it in a particular way. And I think it's amazing to kind of engage on that level, It's not just, oh, here's the latest track from the biggest artist. And So yeah, I think it's incredible to engage on that level. Um, Also, you kind of see the benefit of helping artists much quicker. You get a lot of these kind of like groups, on Facebook and such, where people kind of give feedback on tracks, and a lot of the time I find it's guys just trying to promote the track as opposed to actually engaging with people and trying to get feedback. And I kind of enjoy breaking it down on a very analytical level, and rather than kind of just giving some feedback and then the people never reply it because the track's already on Soundcloud, and then they don't want to remove it because it's now got however many plays or whatever. So yeah, I enjoy listening to that kind of music. But I would say like the references that I use when I'm like doing mix downs and stuff like that, it's generally Asterix, Tristan, Kilowatts, those guys. I think in terms of quality, it's some of the best in our genre, I think.
What kind of friendships have you built in the scene?
Oh, incredible ones. I mean, the fact that like I've garnered so much support, internationally through like the YouTube channel and stuff like that. I've met some really cool people through that. I've met, developers of software, all sorts of crazy, developers of hardware and stuff that I think I never would have connected to if I wasn't into, Psytrance, or if I wasn't into electronic music, or if I wasn't doing the YouTube thing. So I think that's pretty amazing, I think I met you through music production and that kind of thing. So it's incredible. I think it goes beyond like a scene, it's especially with the internet, it can be a business opportunity or anything really. Yeah. There it is. I think, what I said about, just finding the special moments in creating the sounds, outside of the context of a track. I think more producers need to find the beauty in that. Make banks of their own sounds, whether or not they're going to ever use them again. Being able to understand the fundamentals of what creates sound. That's certainly what helped me understand music production and sound design and all that. It was just opening up a synth, clicking on in it, and going from there. Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting thing that not a lot of people talk about, really. Like, art is not appreciated a lot in modern day society.
Yeah, I think it's appreciated more as a product than as a cultural endeavor for betterment of humanity, if you know what I'm saying. And I think more people should just understand that it's like, I get so many questions on my channel. People are like, how long will it be until I make it? Yeah, it's like, hold on, bro. First, you need to understand that you're not going to make it until you truly are happy with what you're doing. And if you're chasing the dream the whole time and forgetting about like just being happy what you're creating, it's gonna be your demise,
Yeah,
You see so many amazing artists just like have this potential and this initiative, and they just go like completely the wrong way and just burn out, and because they're chasing this like $1 million dream that they see on MTV and all that,
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing. It's like, what do you define as a dream? Like, even when I saw your origin, I was like, oh yeah, so you live in a dream. And you're like, oh, kind of. It's like, but what is that? So what is that thing that you're wanting from it?
Yeah. I guess as long as like creatives are constantly dreaming for something bigger, then that's always going to be a big inspiration for it. But it should never be the end goal. The goal should just be creating, I think.